Welcome to the latest edition of SVG's On the Gridiron, where we go behind the scenes of how all the NFL teams are handling this very odd, very unique season in the venue. We're honored here to be joined by Russ Jenisch, Senior Director of Event Presentation and Production with the Denver Broncos in the Mile High City. Russ, thanks so much for joining us today. Really appreciate it, man.
Yeah, I appreciate you asking me to join you. It's great. Thanks, Jason.
Yeah, so you guys open the season on the late Monday Night Football game, which the Broncos tend to draw a lot, being on the West Coast. Sadly, they couldn't pull out a win, a little bit of a breakdown at the end, but I'm sure that there was still a lot of exciting stuff on the production end. We'll talk about that game day stuff in a sec, but I want to talk about the offseason a little bit first, because, man, you guys were crazy busy covering everything that the Broncos had going on. Let's go all the way back to, pretty quick after the pandemic really struck and the lockdown happened, came the draft, and you guys created a lot of cool content around the draft. Can you tell me a little bit about what the operations were?
Before that, we're, I think, unique in that we have a half-hour show that is broadcast, not streamed. It's on a local broadcast affiliate every night of the week, and so we have to come up with a half-hour of content every single night with a very small staff to do that. And now everybody was working from home, and we couldn't use our studio, which we just built within the last year. So there were really a lot of challenges with that. I mean, I tend to try to work in a world where we operate in what we can do, and now all of a sudden I had to consider what we can't do, and then consider what we can do. And so that was a little bit different for us. And so we had a lot of, so we had our editors working at home. Fortunately, NFL Films agreed to allow us to show the season reels since whatever they had, and we edited those down for our broadcasts, added some content to it. So that helped with the lift, because the other thing about the pandemic, there was no content from the training facility. There was nothing, there were no, even after the draft, no OTAs, there was just no activity going on. And so we're tasked with the responsibility of creating unique content, and that's a challenge. So so Zoom obviously became a big part of what we did with our weekly show called Broncos Beat. We had beat writers, and here's where really we got a great opportunity. We would do that in our studio, but because of Zoom and because of COVID and all that, we were able then to bring in people with a more national perspective, because the show was shot in our studio before, so it was mostly local beat writers, etc. Well, now we expanded that reach of those who follow and know something about the NFL and the Broncos. So that was really helpful for us.
Yeah, and you guys have been producing Broncos Beat all the way through now, right? I mean, it's challenging for every franchise to continue to create content during, like you said, a little action during the pandemic. But you guys actually have a broadcast television show that you have to serve every night, and you got to figure out how to put a rundown together, right?
Yeah, and then the other part of that too is, for part of those evenings, we partner up with KOA Radio in Denver. They are our station who carries Broncos content, and every night they have a Broncos Country Tonight show. We built a radio studio with 4 cameras in it that's automated to capture their radio shows, and the 3 to 4 hour radio show, we would edit down to a half-hour show every night. They couldn't be in that facility anymore, so we lost that part of content as well. So lots of challenges, and not to get too deep into it, but the NFL also had a tier system, players being tier 1, support staff tier 2, other staff members tier 3, and then you can't commingle. And so access to players and all that stuff was really limited, and still is.
Yeah, sure. Well, there's a pro and a con here, right? And the con obviously is you literally can't physically be in the same room as players anymore. But the pro, like you said, is when possible, Zoom has opened up all kinds of new avenues in order to get content and get guests that maybe you wouldn't have otherwise.
Yeah, so when our players weren't here physically, or even when they're in town but not at the training facility, we were able to work with PR to get some of the players and coaches on and to participate in some of that programming. So
that's great. Very cool.
I tell you what, I quickly got Zoom fatigue. I know this is Zoom, but you get Zoom fatigue. And fortunately, we're past that. We're now we're doing other things in our stadium and places like that with a real camera, not just this kind of stuff.
That's great to hear, because I think we all have some Zoom fatigue. It's going to become a proper noun in the dictionary pretty quick, I think.
I think you're right, yeah.
But you guys also did some pretty cool stuff during training camp, which again was its own challenge, considering obviously a very unique year with all of the protocols and everything. How did you handle that? And especially without any kind of preseason games or anything this year, training camp had a bigger spotlight than ever.
Do we call them challenges or opportunities? I'm not sure, Jason. And I'll go back just a couple months before that to draft.
Sure.
We did a draft show, and that was streamed. It wasn't broadcast, but streamed. And I was directing that from the loft in my house through a virtual switcher on a computer and delays and trying to tie Zoom into that and cameras in people's houses. So that was kind of a tricky thing to do. And then, we realized pretty quickly that training camp wasn't going to have any fans. That's a big deal in Denver. People love to go down to the UC Health Training Center, watch training camp, especially in a year where we feel we've had a pretty good draft and have some young players who can hopefully bring some excitement to this team. And with all those protocols, what we decided to do were two really basic things. One is I wanted the show not to just be talking heads, but to actually bring training camp to the fans. What can we bring them that they couldn't normally see? And so we did that by having an hour show. And we did that by putting a stage in the parking lot of our training facility. We're outside the fences from training camp. And on that stage, Steve Atwater, Hall of Famer, works for the organization. We had him kind of anchor these training camp shows with other alums, and including Peyton Manning was on there, and Rod Smith, and Carl Mecklenburg, and just Alfred Williams, a number of people. And by having the stage outside, they can just come there, hop on the stage, had a great view of training camp, and they could still tell stories. They can talk about what's going on. Of course, as you probably know and everybody understands, with training camp, we weren't going to show plays and formations because,
Sure.
The Titans could be watching, or Bill Belichick could be watching, or whoever our future opponents are. But still, we got for that we averaged over 96,000 views a day. And over the period of 17 days had 5.5 million plus impressions. So I think real successful as how we approached it and the content we try to bring to fans, which probably wouldn't have been considered, in a quote normal world.
Yeah, exactly. In a normal world. And as a admitted Broncos fan, I could say I did check it out, and it was really impressive. I mean, the level of production coming out of training camp, especially with those big names, like you said, on air, was just really exciting, and it became a lot more tune-in, must-watch for Broncos fans, I think.
I'm glad to hear that. And we did use the studio for that we had at the training facility. We just ran fiber to all of our camera locations, used the switcher, and actually we used two facilities. So I used the control room at UC Health Training Center, where I directed and had a TD and an audio guy, and of course cameras. And then back here at Empower Field at Mile High, we had our replay ops and our graphics person. And the graphics guy was controlling the expression down at the facility remotely. And so again, another way, how can we distance ourselves? Can we have fewer people in there? We all had to be tested on a weekly basis to get into that space, including our freelance staff. So we thought that was a really good win for us, is the ability to use both facilities to bring that show. And I appreciate you watching, Jason.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, you mentioned, Empower Field at Mile High, and let's get into some of the operations. You guys, again, have 1 week under your belt at this point. Let's talk a little bit about how you prepared for the in-game season. Obviously, it's going to be a very different experience that you're trying to create, but you're still trying to create that fun game day ambiance. And to make matters more difficult, no preseason games, right? So no dress rehearsals or anything like that. So tell us a little bit about how you prepared for that week one and some of the elements that ended up in that game day show.
Yeah, I was most concerned because we did an upgrade of our replay in there. And so we had 4 new replay stations, in which we had operators that had some familiarity with it, but not with us. And so that scared me. And it concerned me that we go into game one, week one, where the games matter. And I always talk about, we've got 3 fans that we need to satisfy, or 3 audiences we need to satisfy on game day. That are the fans, it's football, and it's also sponsorship.
Yeah.
And so, and that commitment to football means our replays better be spot on, and we better be able to help the team in that way if ever we can. And so, fortunately, we did have 2 practices at the stadium. They weren't scrimmages, but they were practices. And at least people could get in there, sit, play with the replay system. And we found that we had success with that. That was one of the good things that came out of last Sunday or Monday night. Was our replay actually stepped up and did a nice job.
And in terms of, what's on the board for these events, it's again, there was limited crowd of friends and family, primarily of players for week 1. And then there'll be a larger crowd for week 3 when the Broncos come back home. So what can we expect on those video boards?
Yeah, so because we didn't have the fans, and when you take away the fans from that equation of the 3 audiences, you kind of also remove sponsorship from that, because they're paying to be seen by 76,125 fans at the stadium, and that wasn't possible. So one of the things we did this year, again, pretty ambitious for us, was we did an hour-long pregame show.
Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for tuning in for Broncos Bud Light pregame show delivered by Drizzly. I'm Alexis Perry, and I'm thrilled to be joined by the Hall of Fame safety Steve Atwater and Broncos TV's Matt Boyer. You guys, the Broncos season is finally here under some really unique circumstances. I think we can all agree, and I know I can speak on behalf of Broncos country when I just say we're glad Broncos football is back, baby.
Oh my God! To think about where we were this time in March to get to football now is incredible.
And it started 75 minutes before kick, and it went on our app, our site, and our social channels, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and we did a live show. And so some of those sponsorship content that would be normally in the bowl got moved to the pregame show, so that we can get some eyeballs and some audiences for, again, our sponsors, and try to make them whole. And so that hour-long show featured traditions that we're used to having at the stadium, whether it's the Stampede, the Parade of Colors, the cheer, Thunder the Horse, all those things. And we recorded a lot of that on the field on Thursday night and played it back, including the anthem, where we had Kayla Ruby come in and sing the anthem. We recorded that on a Thursday, played it back as if it were live on the field. So moving that sponsorship stuff to our pregame show was really successful for us. According to our senior director of marketing, there were a couple 100,000 views of that. So we hope sponsorship and our partners there are happy about that. And then in the bowl, we just concentrated on audience number 1, and that's the football team.
Sure.
Live action and replays. And the other thing we did too, again, I understand for a long time, I get paid because of what sponsorship goes and sells. If we did not have those partnerships, there's no reason to have a video board in many ways. And so what I decided to do was told sponsorship, hey, we will jump the breaks. When the network goes to a break, we'll throw up a sponsor logo on the video board, or jump it before they come back. We'll put up a sponsor logo. So when they do those wide establishing shots and they come back and they have their sky cam sweeping in, on the video board, you can see the Empower Retirement logo or the Children's Hospital logo. And I think that worked really well. I went back and reviewed the game, and certainly they don't take those shots every time they come in, but that was another way in which we could help sponsorship, is let's put logos up there and get them captured, and change our LEDs to make sure that if there's an opportunity for the network audience to see that, that might be a win for our corporate sponsors.
Yeah, that's some exposure that wouldn't have happened otherwise. Right?
Absolutely. The one thing about sponsorship, though, once you do that, they'll probably never want to take that away. That's
true. Let's be honest. Anytime you give a new deliverable, it doesn't get taken away again.
It does not, no. But it, it worked pretty well. And of course, you dim the board so that when the network comes in, the image looks really nice on television. You can't have it blown out like we see sometimes at college or other professional sports.
Sure. Yeah. And again, there will be some limited fans as of now for week 3 when the team comes back home. Is that going to change your plans in terms of in the in-venue experience?
Yeah, I think we want to be more like we're used to doing. And whether there's 5,000 or 76,000 fans, we want to create the hype, the pump videos, and those types of things, and give the fans that are there that in full experience. And again, we'll focus on sponsorship and football and fans. As always, we didn't do a whole lot on the creative side on our Monday night game. We'll change that in a couple of weeks when Tampa comes to town here. But there's nothing like, you cannot recreate for the fans, the 76,000 fans who are screaming and yelling. We get a curated audio track from the league that we're supposed to play in the bowl to give it presence. It has to run at 70 dB, and it's just white noise. You know, when our fans get excited, well, just when they get a little bit excited, they're over 100 dB. When we put up a noise meter and tell them to get really excited, they push that even more. And so that drone is really kind of crazy. And reaction from football too. The league said, hey, it breaks or injuries, kill that white noise. Well, in the injuries, it was so dead in there. It was scary. And so we'll need to adjust that.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, the audio is obviously among the biggest challenges, and in venue, you guys have that 70 dB. And when you think about how loud it can get in the Mile High City, sometimes it's tough to imagine it just being at 70 dB white noise. But regardless, I'm excited to hear you guys are going to have some creative elements when the team comes back. Should be really cool. And Russ, hey, thanks, man. Really, really appreciate you taking the time. Glad that you guys are still doing games, creating content, and please, the best from all of us at SVG to the Broncos video team out there.
Well, we appreciate that. We got a hardworking crew who've put a lot together, and those training camp shows and the pregame shows is a pretty big lift. And it's funny, Jason, we are working more as broadcasters, even though the team was built to be in stadium. And I think that we've done well, and I'm excited because the other thing that's missing is the music to get the players hyped up and excited. We introduce the team and they just run out instead of individual, and you're not building that. So I want to grow that and really provide that experience for our players. It's got to be eerie for them, of course.
Yeah, well, if you can get a seat, one of the limited seats inside Empire Field at Mile High in the next few weeks. If not, check them out on TV. I'm sure these guys have lots of cool content coming. Russ, thanks again, man, and please stay well.
Always. Thanks. I appreciate your time, Jason. Be good. See ya.